I'm down here in Florida at the Extreme Accuracy Institute talking with Gordy Gritters. This is a real privilege. I'm here taking the class all week, the Master Rifle Builders class, and I have picked up a lot. Thank you, Gordy, for coming and talking with me here.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. What I thought we could talk about is the key factors that affect accuracy, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what those are. But before we get into the specifics, I want to talk about what is extreme accuracy. And that's kind of your world, right? You've done Benchrest shooting, Benchrest reloading, Benchrest rifle building, won matches, built rifles that have set world records. So that people know that haven't shot Benchrest, what does that really mean? When you're shooting at 100 yards, for instance, what is a record-setting gun? What does a 5-shot group look like for that?
Yeah, different. Obviously it makes a difference on the conditions on the day and where you're at and the distance. 100, 200, 300, 600,000, whatever it is makes a difference. But at 100 yards, I don't know what the world record is, but it's way down in the low zeros. Somewhere, meaning this, 0.00 something, or
less than
like 7,000 or something like that is like the world record.
Yep.
5-shot group. But on any given day at a short range Benchrest match, you're going to get guys shooting in the zeros where you're less than a tenth of an inch for 5-shot groups and things like that. And
you were saying that guys will actually shoot underground to do their testing.
Yes, there are some guys that do some testing underground, and that takes a lot of the atmosphere parameters out of the way, wind and mirage and stuff like that. It's amazing what you can learn from those guys and what they're learning from testing that they can pass on to other shooters in the world. And it's just so intriguing to this whole accuracy world is very intriguing. What they can learn from underground testing is applicable in the real world. So.
And here's what I learned at lunch today talking with Gordy is that these guys that compete for Benchrest are so serious they will literally buy companies that supply components and supply equipment so that they have the upper hand to win these competitions, or so they don't lose access to this kind of stuff. Build their own ranges. Hornady actually has a 200-yard underground indoor range, and that would be a phenomenal capability to have.
Yeah.
So how about if we took it out to 1,000 yards in regular atmospheric conditions at a Benchrest match? What would that?
That's what I'm most familiar with. I've competed in 1,000 yard for so many years. I used to own and operate the Iowa 1,000-yard Benchrest club, and that was very very enjoyable. And then learned a lot from that, obviously. But you got the heavy gun class and the light gun class. Heavy gun class 10-shot groups, and light gun class is 5-shot groups in the IBS discipline we were shooting. And on any given day on good condition matches, you get a lot of guys end up shooting down in the 1-inch range, the high 1.8, 1.9 or something like that. There's the world record. I can't tell off the top of my head what the world record is, but it's down in the low 1-inch range for 5-shot groups. And the heavy heavy guns, the 10-shot groups, you're down in the low 3-inch range is the record. But you get guys that shoot in the 3-inch, 4-inch range, in the heavy gun class in good conditions, and that's putting them right in there at 1,000 yards. So.
And that's, I think, why it's interesting to have this discussion with you, is these are the people that are absolutely the most serious about the pure accuracy, right? They're not doing tactical shooting. They're not doing speed necessarily in the same way. They're really just focused on the accuracy piece. And that's what people have become more and more and more interested in. Is, it might be a hunting gun. I still want it to be as accurate as possible. So why don't we walk through the most important factors affecting accuracy, from the ones that are the lowest hanging fruit, in other words, the ones that'll make the biggest difference, and then maybe walk down towards those real extreme OCD, fine-tuning techniques, factors, all these things that really only Benchrest shooters would care to do.
Yeah, and the interesting part about accuracy with rifle is it applies across the board. The stuff that makes a Benchrest gun shoot good makes a hunting gun shoot good. It applies across the board. There's different cartridges involved, different barrel contours, different stocks, but accuracy is accuracy. What affects one gun affects another gun. So what you learn in competitions like Benchrest and F-class and things like that apply to hunting guns and all other disciplines, stuff like that. Again, I'm most familiar with the Benchrest world, so that's where I'm coming from and where I've learned so much stuff from. But But I got what I call the big five for accuracy for talking across the board for hunters as well as competition shooters. The big five are trigger. Get the not necessarily the trigger itself, is getting the trigger set for the type of shooting you're doing. You don't want to have a 2 or 3 pound trigger in a Benchrest gun. You sure don't want to have a 1 ounce or 2 ounce trigger in a hunting gun. So get the trigger set for the type of shooting you're doing. If you do, I always tell hunters that if you got a 2 pound trigger pull and you're hunting in the wintertime with gloves on, the gun is controlling you. When you got to take a shot and aim at a deer or something like that, and you're so concentrated on not letting the gun go off accidentally because you can't feel the trigger through gloves and with cold hands, then the gun's controlling you. But if you get set at a 3 or 4 pound trigger pull and aim at that animal, then you can feel the trigger, you can concentrate totally on your shot placement and make the shot go when you want it to, then you're in control of it. So set the trigger where you want, which isn't necessarily as light as what so many people like to do. Light is handy, obviously. So trigger's number one. Number two, barrel. Get a good barrel, get the bore of the barrel good. Number three is the crown. Make sure there's no dings on the crown, which is going to affect the bullet as it leaves. Number four is your bedding. The bedding of the stock, the bedding of the barreled action in the stock is a joint. Every time you shoot that gun, it moves. That joint moves every single time. If it's not bedded properly, it's going to move and sit just slightly different every single shot. And then when it shoots, it vibrates slightly different, so that pulls the barrel slightly different while the bullet's still going through it, so you lose some accuracy. When it's bedded properly, that gun absolutely, even though it's a joint which moves every single shot, it does it absolutely the same for every single shot while the bullet's going through the barrel. So it shoots better. And then the fifth thing, and these aren't necessarily in order, these are just the 5 things. The fifth thing is bolt lug contact. Bolt lug is so critical, bolt lug contact is so critical that if you only have one lug touch, metal's flexible. I can take this 3,000 pound lathe, push on it 40, 50 pounds at one end and put a 1/10,000 dial indicator at the other end. I can watch that needle move slightly, but I can see it. Well, I'm actually bending that lathe. When you take a 5 or 10 pound gun, 15 pound gun, whatever the case may be, it can flex very easily when it's got 50 or 60,000 pounds per square inch of chamber pressure going on inside of it. So of course you got equal opposite reaction going every which direction. So part of that reaction is pushing back, the cartridge pushing back against the bolt face. The bolt face, of course the bolt lugs, if one lug is touching, one lug's not, pushes back on the recoil lug seat in the action. One lug before the other one. The other one will eventually touch, but if one touches first, it flexes that action. What's hooked to that action right there is the barrel. So that puts a vibration in the barrel while the bullet's going through it. So that just hurts your accuracy. So you get good, nice, even contact when the gun fires, pushes back evenly. They just shoot better. And so that's those are the real big 5 things. There's a lot of other smaller things that also apply and affect accuracy. But you get those 5 things right, the gun's gonna shoot well. So then you get into other smaller things like ignition, firing pin, how much firing pin travel you got, and the spring pressure you got. Is it hitting the primer hard enough? I got what's called a primer penetration test. Well, I like to see the primer get hit hard enough to at least penetrate 20 thousandths. To get good ignition. If you got 13 or 14, 15, 16 thousandths or thousandths of an inch primer penetration, it may still fire every time, but your ignition is going to start suffering. Your extreme spreads will open up, so it doesn't shoot as well. So that's another thing. The blueprinting in action, truing up the face of the action, the threads, all that kind of stuff is nice. It adds to all this stuff. Scope mounting, if a scope's mounted wrong in the rings, it very definitely will affect how that is. So that can become a big thing, but that's, all these things all apply. But, most guns across the board for, the hunting guns especially that I deal with, you get those 5 things right, it's going to shoot really well. And of course, Benchrest, you take all these things to extreme levels.
Yes.
And a whole bunch of other stuff. We've talked about some of the stuff this week, but it still applies across the board, all this stuff. So
what I think is interesting is there's some things that you can work around as a gunsmith, like taking the Remington 700 factory, $299 gun that we've been working on, truing up the receiver, doing a rebarrel on it, that kind of thing. And you can get a lot of the same benefits that you get from a custom action or a full custom gun, that kind of thing. But then there's other things that you can't necessarily work around. If your scope has bad internals, if your scope doesn't reset to 0, you could completely chase your tail all day, right? So,
absolutely.
So if someone is looking at their rifle, either the one they already have or one that they're going to buy or have built, this is what you do a lot, right? You help people.
All the time.
You're like a realtor, except instead of helping people buy houses, you're helping them find what's going to work for their budget, what's going to meet their needs, and all that. So, depending on someone's budget, there's going to be all of these, different options. They might have an existing gun. They might have you build a gun. What do you think is kind of the sweet spot for that shooter that wants extreme accuracy, whatever they want to call that? Say it's quarter-inch groups or something like that, but they have a relatively modest budget of a few grand or something total for everything. Would you be more likely to want to do a budget build for them, or would you want to take a gun that they already have, a rifle, and accurize it?
For the customer, the guy that's on a budget, and I get that a lot, but I deal with people all the time that's the case, and then that's great. You can cheaper rebuild a gun, especially if one he already has, put a good barrel in it, or even accurize what's there. If it's got a good barrel, you can evaluate a barrel. If I get a barrel in a gun, custom or factory barrel, and I can slug and evaluate the barrel and feel it opening up toward the muzzle, that's a killer. That gun will not shoot good. And if it's slight enough, I can hand lap that barrel and make it okay. Generally, I'm just going to recommend then the guy replace the barrel. But if he's looking for a gun, and I get that a lot, guys wanting to shoot a quarter-inch gun, a quarter-minute gun, whatever you want to call it, and so we're going to use a good cartridge. There's the gun, there's the ammo, and there's the shooter. Those three things really all have to work good to attain that level of accuracy.
Yep.
But I can work with them on that and help them with that, or other gunsmiths out in the world can do that with their customers. But typically, if the guy already has a gun, we can put a barrel on it, tighten up the bolt play in an action to get good bolt lug contact, lap the lugs, to get good bolt lug contact, bed it into a stock, especially if the stock is conducive for the type of shooting that he wants to do, and you're gonna have a fantastic shooting gun. Get a good trigger in it, get it set where you want it, get a good scope on it, and he'll be in it for a very budget price that'll have a gun will shoot phenomenal. And some of those they may not be as competitive as a full-blown Benchrest gun, but they'll be able to go out and shoot extremely well, in club matches and even at other matches themselves. And when they get to the level where they want to expand into a full-blown custom gun, or if they get that serious about competition shooting, then they can build a gun purpose-built for that purpose. But boy, for just fun, accurate shooting on club level or prairie dog hunting or whatever, just fun shooting and very accurate either hunting or shooting, you can do that so well with a factory gun. You can tune those things and true them up, and put a decent barrel in them and do what's available to do with that for not a lot of money compared to what a full blown custom gun would be, and it'd be great. They're just awesome.
So that answers that question. I'll ask you the counterpoint now. That's what do you need to do, or what would be the best things to do on a modest budget, and then what on the flip side do you see people doing that they don't need to do, right? Because you can spend a whole lot of money on something you're not necessarily going to reap the rewards on, so like where would you say people tend to go overboard where they don't maybe need to?
Some of that depends on a lot of, you can spend a ton of money on cosmetics, on thinking that you have to buy a $2,000 scope. It's really nice to have it, and it's an advantage if you can afford that. But if you can go out and buy a decent scope for $500 to $1,000 or something like that, depending on what you're after and stuff like that, there's a lot of good stuff out there. You got to be real careful buying used stuff. You got to know what you're looking at there, and you can go out and buy what looks like a really, really good deal. Well, that might be a Chinese knockoff.
Right.
You don't want that either.
Yep.
But there's a lot of good like competition guns. There's a lot of good stuff for sale. That's really, the shooters, they like fresh stuff, new things. A lot of times people put stuff up for sale, and there's several different places that sell used guns, and some forums or some classifieds online on some of these websites that you can buy some pretty decent, decently used stuff. If you get involved in competitive shooting, you're going to be around people that are going to have stuff for sale. They'll be your fellow competitors. So you buy a gun from him, and he goes out and builds something else, and you can rework what he's got. A good budget way to do things, but you can spend so terribly much money if you don't have it that just on cosmetic stuff, on spending way more money on some things than the others. But yes, a lot of times things like barrels are pretty darn important. Getting the type of stock set up for the type of shooting you're going to do is pretty important. The scope, you got to have a good scope.
Yep.
You can spend so much money on a custom action. you can spend a ton of money on really high dollar custom dies, handmade by your gunsmith, where you go out and have some of these other companies that will build a good die for you on your prints, and you can save several $100s doing that. And so yeah, just I guess that's kind of where
sometimes you can do a lot with a little. I think that's where the hand loading comes in.
Yep.
Fire forming your brass, knowing exactly kind of what neck tension you want to run, maybe neck turning your brass, those sorts of things. A lot with load development. Definitely that can make a huge difference. We were talking about barrel harmonics versus burn efficiency and getting your standard deviations in check versus, making sure that you have good groups, and the intersection of those two is what will really get you successful at, 1,000 yards and beyond. So those are some of the things that, I want to focus on now. I've spent the entire week here at the Extreme Accuracy Institute. I've learned so much, my mind is exploding, but now I can go back and I can explore each of these topics in detail. You mentioned the muzzle opening up. Well, I did some muzzle threading on some 30 cals that I've got to check now, because with button rifle barrels and internal stresses, that can cause them to open up. Someone raised that through a comment on the channel, and now we had several discussions about that here. Now I know how to check for that by slugging the barrel and pulling it through. So here's my commitment to you all. I want you to subscribe with notifications, because I'm going to do more stories around what I've learned here and all the rifle builds that I'm doing. I'd love to hear if there's something specifically that you'd like to see on the channel. Leave that as a comment, and I'll put that in the hopper. And eventually we'll get around to a bunch more of this stuff. So thank you, Gordy. That's super helpful to have a quick walkthrough of all of these factors affecting accuracy. And I'm just so excited to take my game to the next level with my shooting, with my rifle building, and with all of this fine tuning and stuff. So thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Until next time, happy shooting and happy reloading.